Okay, let's unpack this. We all spend, well, a huge chunk of our lives working, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But have you ever really stopped to think about why work matters? Beyond just getting a paycheck.
Hmm.
It feels like the very definition of work is constantly shifting under our feet.
It really does.
Theodore Roosevelt had this great line: "Far and away, the best prize life has to offer is the chance to work hard at work worth doing."
That's powerful.
It just gets right to the heart of it, doesn't it?
That quote really does set the stage. It suggests there's something intrinsically valuable about the effort itself, but um, crucially, only if the work feels worthwhile, like it has meaning.
And that's exactly what this deep dive is all about. We're taking a serious look at what the meaning of work truly entails.
Right.
You've shared this fascinating stack of source materials with us, and they act like a roadmap, really, guiding us through how the idea of work has evolved through history, what shapes it today, and maybe where it's heading next.
Yeah, we're going to be tracing its path from, ancient perspectives through the revolutions of industry and technology, right up to what the sources call the cutting-edge post-digital age of imagination.
Okay. So, our mission, really, is to unpack the core ideas here. We want to see how the meaning of work has shifted across different eras and cultures,
Hmm.
identify the values that really drive our relationship with what we do, and get a clearer sense of what the workplace of the future might actually look like.
And the skills you'll likely need to thrive in it.
Exactly.
Get ready to explore what makes work meaningful, why it sometimes feels like, well, a grind,
Yeah.
and the incredible potential it holds both for society and for you as an individual.
So let's dive right in. Where do these sources even begin to define something as fundamental as work?
Well, at its most basic level, the sources define work as a central human activity. It's typically something done for another party
Okay.
in exchange for some form of compensation.
Okay, that sounds pretty transactional. But it's definitely more than just swapping time for money, isn't it?
Absolutely. They point out that work isn't confined just to the paid job. It's linked to a whole constellation of roles individuals take on throughout their lives, in family, community,
Right.
and yes, the workplace, including non-paid contributions. Crucially, the material emphasizes that work can be a powerful contributor to personal fulfillment
Fulfillment.
and
Well,
can even provide a profound sense of purpose in life.
that makes sense. And the sources also talk about the concept of decent work. What does that really entail in this context?
So decent work, as framed here, isn't just about having a job. It's about work that satisfies basic human needs: survival, power, social connection, and self-determination.
Okay, those sound pretty fundamental.
They are. And it's also presented as a basic human right and a vehicle for social justice, specifically highlighting the right to fair and just pay.
So when we ask, why do you work? The answer is clearly multifaceted. What factors do the sources say determine that complex meaning for an individual?
The material highlights that the meaning of work is shaped significantly by individual values, specific work goals, and the immediate job environment.
Right, the personal stuff.
But they also stress the massive influence of external forces. Think about technological advancements, especially in the digital era.
Oh, definitely.
They've created new forms of work like freelancing and self-employment, which offer autonomy and flexibility, fundamentally changing how many people experience and think about work.
And it's not just the tech, right? Sociocultural influences, how we're raised, educated, they mold our understanding too.
Absolutely. And these meanings are anything but fixed. They definitely shift over time, across generations, and through major societal changes.
Which transitions us perfectly into looking at the journey of work's meaning across history, according to these readings.
Yeah, let's go back.
Let's start way back in the pre-industrial era. What was work like before, factories and mass production?
In the pre-industrial era, the meaning of work was quite varied, almost contradictory depending on the context.
How so?
Well, for some, it was seen purely as drudgery, a burden you had to bear just to survive.
Okay, the necessary evil sort of view.
Right. But for many others, it was deeply intertwined with spiritual or religious ends, a way to serve a higher power, achieve salvation, or fulfill a divine purpose.
Ah, so a spiritual dimension.
And for a select few, perhaps artisans or scholars, it was seen as intrinsically meaningful for its own sake, valuable just for the skill and effort involved.
So necessity mixed with duty, and sometimes that spark of inherent value. It sounds like different ancient cultures really captured this mix in distinct ways.
They certainly did, and our sources give some fascinating examples. The Greeks and Romans, for instance, often viewed manual labor as a burden.
The burden.
Yeah, something that could contaminate the mind best left to slaves.
Wow, okay.
In contrast, the ancient Hebrews saw it as drudgery due to original sin, but also as a way to earn forgiveness, granting spiritual dignity.
So still tough, but with a path to redemption.
Exactly. And importantly for them, work was closely linked to charity, a means to provide for the needy.
Interesting how one saw it as contaminating, the other as purifying. How did religious views in later periods shape this?
The sources detail how Catholicism saw work, often through the lens of expiation, charity, and purification. Accumulating wealth wasn't forbidden, but the ultimate focus remained on the afterlife.
Work wasn't the end goal.
No. St. Thomas even proposed a hierarchy of work types. Then Protestantism, particularly with figures like Martin Luther, introduced a significant shift.
How so?
Work became a divine duty. You served God by working well in any calling. No work was inherently superior. All helped build God's kingdom.
That's a big change.
Huge. This Protestant work ethic, as Weber later argued, became intricately linked with the rise of capitalism and shaped specific work values.
That's a major conceptual shift from work as a means to salvation or charity, to work itself being a form of worship. Were there other significant cultural perspectives mentioned?
Yes, the sources touch on Persian society, where work had a strong ethical dimension.
That-
Seen as instrumental in keeping the land fertile, acquiring property, providing shelter, essentially, an act of good against evil.
Wow.
Eastern philosophies like Confucianism often focused on work as a path for spiritual and character growth. The idea was that hard work built character, allowed you to earn an honest living,
Building character.
reflecting values that influenced high-trust employment practices and a collective sense of purpose in some Asian cultures.
And the Renaissance. That era seems to celebrate individual achievement.
The Renaissance marked a shift in focus towards human capability. Value was placed more on a person's intellectual abilities and creative mastery, not just physical labor.
Right, the Renaissance man idea.
Exactly. Work became seen as intrinsically meaningful in itself, tied to mastering skills and individuals becoming masters of their own craft and destiny.
Okay, that gives us a solid picture of the pre-industrial world. Then came the seismic shift of the industrial era. What happened to the meaning of work when factories took over?
Oh, industrialization. With its focus on mechanistic mass production and efficiency, it had a profound and often negative impact on the experience of work.
Negative how?
Work became fragmented into repetitive, often mind-numbing tasks driven by principles like Taylor's scientific management.
Taylorism, right. Efficiency above all else.
Exactly. The sources note this had a detrimental effect on workers' personal commitment. High production often meant incredibly long hours, and people increasingly looked for meaning and fulfillment entirely outside of work. The material points out that the meaning of work became problematic because it was no longer self-evident.
It had been stripped away by the system.
Precisely. The focus became the output, the sheer volume of products, not the worker's experience or the intrinsic value of the task itself.
It sounds like any inherent value for artisans or those finding spiritual meaning was just lost in the noise and rhythm of the machines.
That's a good way to put it.
Okay, fast forward again to the post-industrial era, ushered in by information technology and globalization. How did that reshape the meaning of work?
The post-industrial era brought a flood of multicultural viewpoints due to globalization and the rise of IT.
Right. The world got smaller, digitally speaking.
Yeah. Work environments became less fixed, more service-driven, and increasingly technology-intensive. The key insight from the sources here is that the meaning of work in this era became viewed much more as a social construct.
Social construct, meaning?
Meaning something dynamic and fluid, not rigid. It expressed itself through three key lenses. Job, meaning the value of the specific tasks. Role, meaning value from one's position. And self, meaning how work contributes to identity.
Okay.
All shaped by the specific sociocultural context.
And postmodernism played a role in this fluidity, right? I remember reading that.
Yes, the sources connect this to postmodernism, which emphasized individual choice, questioning norms, celebrating difference.
So more individualism.
Employees started exhibiting characteristics like self-actualization, wanting to behave according to personal values, hedonism, seeking enjoyment from work, Entitlements, expecting things like freedom and dress code, anti-productivism, questioning relentless economic growth, and anti-authoritarianism,
Questioning the boss.
being more willing to question traditional authority structures, yeah.
So that sounds like a workforce demanding more agency and fulfillment than just, a corporate ladder and a stable salary.
Exactly. And the sources link this directly to the turbulent changes of the 21st century workplace. Globalization, mergers, restructuring, downsizing.
All that disruption.
These changes increased global competition, leveraged IT extensively, re-engineered business processes often leading to job displacement,
Right.
shifted focus to smaller, service-oriented companies, and blurred the very idea of a job as a fixed, unchanging collection of tasks.
And how did all that instability impact employees?
Initially, in quite challenging ways. Lower employee loyalty to organizations, decreased morale, motivation, little work security.
Sounds stressful.
Individuals were essentially forced into what the sources call a protein career.
A protein career. That sounds a bit like the Greek god Proteus who could change shape. Is that the idea?
That's a great way to think about it. It's a career shaped and directed by the individual, not the organization.
Okay, so you're in charge of your own path.
Right. Self-employment and entrepreneurship became more common responses. Amidst this constant change and uncertainty, people also began a deeper search for spiritual meaning and sense-making within their working lives.
So the protein career is essentially a survival strategy in a less stable world. Or is it more?
More than just survival, it's characterized by proactive, self-directed career management, mobility, and agility.
Agility, right.
The material points out that people started focusing less on what job title they wanted to be and more on what they wanted to do.
Doing versus being. Interesting.
Developing their strengths and capabilities in meaningful ways, regardless of whether it fit a traditional job box. They became more fluid in their career planning, constantly adjusting.
This leads us right into the digital era, or what's often called Industry 4.0. How did the sources define the meaning of work here?
The digital era, powered by the Fourth Industrial Revolution, brought high-tech living and enabled truly independent working lifestyles.
Like remote work, gig economy stuff.
Exactly. The sources argue that the meaning of work here is found in self-regulated career management, cultivating career agility, focusing on continuous personal growth,
Lifelong learning.
and adopting an entrepreneurial mindset towards creating your own employment rather than just seeking it.
So leveraging technology not just to do your job, but to actively shape your career and growth.
Precisely. It's about being business and digitally savvy, creating and selling niche products or services using digital platforms.
Lower barriers to entry.
Much lower, yes. Lifelong learning, strong sense of personal agency, constant upskilling, agility, and flexibility in adapting to rapid change become absolutely crucial.
And work-life balance comes in here too.
A strong emphasis emerging on work-life balance and integration, often within digitally connected community systems. Autonomy, control, and flexibility in these independent, self-directed forms of work are highly, highly valued.
And the human experience, that personal connection to the work, seems to come back into sharper focus here. It feels like we're circling back a bit.
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
The meaning of work in this era becomes embedded in questions like, am I genuinely using my unique strengths? Am I making a tangible difference? Do I add real value? It's a movement beyond just being a job title to actively doing things that feel inherently meaningful to you.
And the sources suggest the COVID-19 pandemic didn't just accelerate trends, it actually pushed us into a new, distinct phase.
Yeah.
The post-digital age of imagination. That sounds like a big concept.
It is a fascinating idea presented in the material. The pandemic, according to the sources, acted as a catalyst, potentially shifting society from purely an information age into an age driven by imagination.
Imagination, how so?
This forced organizations globally to fundamentally reimagine workplaces and workspaces, accelerating the move towards more boundaryless, perhaps even metaverse-connected environments.
Okay.
It marks a potential transition away from that older, mechanistic view of work where jobs were rigid boxes, towards a much more human-centric, skills-based model.
A skills-based model sounds like a radical departure from traditional job descriptions and corporate structures.
It is a major insight from the sources. Workers are increasingly being aligned with tasks that specifically match their skills and capabilities.
Tasks, not jogs.
Right. Emphasizing outcomes and contributions over rigid job titles or structures. Continuous upskilling and reskilling aren't optional anymore. They are essential.
Constant learning again.
Absolutely. The material suggests workers gain more autonomy to influence how, where, and for whom they work. with a greater emphasis on fulfilling personal career values and having truly meaningful work experiences.
And AI fits in here.
They even mention AI-powered virtual career assistants as a potential tool to support career growth by matching workers with suitable tasks and identifying necessary training.
So, in this future, is work defined by the skills required for a task rather than just a fixed job description? Is that the core idea?
That appears to be the core idea emerging from these sources for the post-digital age. This era fosters meaningful work by making it easier to match specific tasks and roles with employees' unique skills, interests, values, goals.
The whole person.
Yes, the very idea of the workforce is reimagined to include both human and digital workers, seeing all talent models as part of one expanded system. Workforce analytics provide a consolidated view of this expanded, open workforce ecosystem.
And this ties into new opportunities like fractional work or project-based roles. We hear a lot about that.
Absolutely. These models are explicitly mentioned as offering new career opportunities driven by worker preferences, agency, and the choice for more multi-directional career paths.
Not just climbing one ladder.
Exactly. However, the sources are realistic and do note potential challenges, using South Africa as an example.
What kind of challenges?
They highlight how factors like low education levels, limited tech infrastructure, inadequate training systems, and existing socioeconomic inequalities can really hinder this transition.
So it's not an easy shift for everyone.
No, it can limit mobility for many and widen existing gaps if not managed carefully.
That gives us a powerful overview of the evolution and where we might be heading. Now, what about the actual characteristics of this post-digital era workplace? What does it feel like to be in one, according to the sources?
Our sources list several key characteristics. Organizations are becoming more self-driven, needing to be incredibly agile, constantly learning, unlearning, relearning,
Constant churn, almost.
and increasingly data-driven. On the human side, the workforce prefers flexible, collaborative, and unconstrained workspaces that support continuous, agile learning.
So the physical office changes drastically.
The old idea of being tied to a specific desk or office seems less and less relevant.
And that traditional concept of a job for life seems completely out the window then.
Definitely a thing of the past, according to the material. The trend is strongly towards high-impact, often shorter-term projects or roles.
Projects, not permanent jobs.
Right. Global skill shortages are prompting organizations to rely more heavily on alternative workforce personnel contractors, freelancers, gig workers,
The open workforce again?
for both growth and competitiveness. The concept of job crafting, where individuals proactively shape their tasks and interactions, is likely to become even more important for individuals to find meaning.
This alternative workforce brings unique skills and wants that autonomy we discussed earlier, right?
Exactly. Leveraging this workforce enhances the overall work experience for organizations and provides the autonomy needed for workers to better balance and enrich their broader lives through their work.
And HR changes too.
The sources mention that human resources departments are increasingly relying on AI, not just for basic admin, but to enhance person-job fit.
Okay, that matching function again.
By more scientifically matching candidates to roles based on competencies, characteristics, experience, even future potential.
So AI isn't just automating jobs, it's potentially helping match people to better, more meaningful work. That's an optimistic take.
That's part of the picture presented, yes.
Yeah.
AI, cognitive technologies, and robotics are driving job redesign across pretty much every industry by automating specific tasks.
Automating tasks, not necessarily whole jobs.
Correct. The material notes this also leads to flatter organizational structures, which increases the need for internal talent mobility, moving people around based on skills needed for different projects,
Skills again.
rather than fixed departmental roles. Organizations are actively learning to manage this diverse workforce comprising human, digital, robotic, and AI elements for greater overall agility.
It sounds less like an organization and more like an open ecosystem workforce, as you said.
That's precisely how the sources describe it. An ecosystem comprising individuals, companies, and technologies sourced globally. Work goes far beyond traditional roles and physical locations.
And employers are using this.
They're using this open skills-based approach to build a sustainable workforce that can truly adapt to constant change. The focus is shifting to improving performance and development for all workforce members, human and non-human alike, within this ecosystem.
And fractional and project work really reinforce this flexibility, offering choice.
They do, creating those new career opportunities driven by individual preference and choice, allowing people to build a portfolio of work rather than just having one employer.
Okay. To navigate this complex, evolving landscape, what kind of skills or competencies are needed? The sources break this down quite thoroughly, it seems.
They identify key competencies crucial for this post-digital era workplace. First, what they call interpersonal competencies.
Intrapersonal,
Yeah,
so within yourself.
exactly. Your relationship with yourself and your own abilities. It includes cognitive skills like critical thinking, general knowledge of finance, business analytical thinking,
Makes sense.
and crucially, emotional abilities like resilience and emotional regulation, managing your own state in a constantly changing environment.
So understanding yourself, how you think, learn, manage emotions, that's foundational. What about dealing with others in this new context?
That falls under interpersonal competencies. The ability to build and sustain constructive relationships, navigate what's called emotional labor.
Emotional labor, managing feelings during interactions.
Yes, managing emotions during interactions, and effective communication, which is even more complex across digital platforms and global teams.
Definitely more complex now.
Right.
And interacting with the technology itself must be critical.
Absolutely. That's interdigital competencies. This is the ability to engage with and manage digital solutions, having a general digital affinity, being digitally familiar.
Just comfortable with the tech.
Comfortable and competent using the tools in the age, yeah.
There's another one that sounded intriguing, intradigital competencies. What's that?
Yes, that's a less common term, but important in the sources. It refers to the tendency to comply with rules of engagement, policies, procedures, and ethical frameworks, specifically in the digital space.
Ah, so like digital citizenship.
Kind of. Think data privacy, online conduct,
Yeah.
digital security awareness. It also includes administrative capabilities applied digitally planning, organizing files, arranging work online while adhering to deadlines in a boundaryless environment.
Those definitely sound crucial for functioning effectively and responsibly in a digitally connected world. Okay, the sources also lay out psychosocial pathways to finding meaningful work in this post-digital age. What are those pathways?
They describe 4 potential avenues for individuals to connect with meaning. First, self-agency.
Agency, empowerment.
This is about individuals embracing the necessary mindsets and attributes to adapt to the new ways of working brought on by technology, feeling empowered to navigate change proactively.
Okay, taking control.
Second, other agency. This involves working within the digitally enabled metaverse or virtual hybrid spaces, adapting to those environments.
Right.
And importantly, trusting organizations to redesign work experiences that truly empower them through digital platforms for better communication and collaboration.
So adapting yourself and also finding systems you can trust to enable your adaptation. That makes sense.
Exactly. Then there's self-communion. This is about authentic self-expression through work,
Being your true self at work.
where technology actually enhances job and financial security by offering boundaryless career paths, opportunities for skill development, creativity, personal growth, maybe better work-life balance, remote options.
Without compromising income.
Right, it's work feeling aligned with your true self.
And finally, other communion.
This pathway is about cultivating authentic connection with others, even when working in distributed or virtual environments.
Connection despite distance.
It emphasizes values like connection, community, and drawing from the sources, specifically African humanism or Ubuntu,
Ubuntu, right. I am because we are.
fostering empathy, collaboration, and embracing multicultural diversity in the global, digitally connected workspace. It pushes for a more human-centered approach despite the technology.
That feels like a really important counterpoint, ensuring human connection isn't lost in the high-tech future. Okay, let's shift slightly. Let's talk about work as a central life interest. What does that concept mean in the context of these sources?
Work as a central life interest simply refers to how important working is in an individual's life compared to other life roles or interests at any given point in time.
So how central is work to you?
Exactly. It's about the centrality of work. The sources mention research suggesting that for the majority of people, work isn't actually the most important thing.
Oh, interesting.
Although its centrality definitely varies across different groups, often highest for professionals, for example.
So it's less about how much you like the specific tasks, maybe, and more about how the overall value outcomes or rewards from work stack up against the importance of family, hobbies, community, etc. Is that it?
That's a key insight. It's weighing what work provides income, status, connection, growth against what other parts of life provide.
The whole picture.
And the sources stress approaching this idea critically, remembering that the meaning and centrality of work are heavily influenced by multicultural worldviews. Contrasting, for instance, Western individualistic perspectives with potentially more collective African perspectives.
That's a really important nuance. This discussion of centrality and multicultural influence leads us directly to work and career values. These sources list quite a few. How do these underlying values shape our perception of work?
Values, these deeply held norms, principles, needs, what's important to us are fundamental dispositions that influence all our behavior,
Including at work.
including our behavior at work. They're relatively stable and applicable across different parts of our lives, though individual values can shift over time, especially with age and experience.
Okay.
They develop from both internal psychological factors, like a need for self-worth or growth, and external sociocultural forces, like family, religion, or desired lifestyle.
And work values are essentially how those broader personal values manifest in the context of a job or career. Is that fair?
Exactly. They represent what an individual wants to obtain or experience from work. They're intertwined with career values, which are based on evaluating the desirability of different job attributes.
Like pay versus flexibility.
Right. The sources distinguish between intrinsic career values, which are the rewards you get from doing the task itself,
Yeah.
like interest, challenge, autonomy,
The internal stuff.
and extrinsic values,
You
which
know.
are the external rewards, like income, prestige, security.
The external stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
The sources list values like advancement, power, status, autonomy, self-determination, competency, leisure, economic compensation, social values like belonging, community, human moral values like Ubuntu, work-family enrichment, and workplace spirituality. Wow, that's a really comprehensive list,
It is.
covering a huge range of human motivations and needs related to work.
It is, and each of these values influences how we perceive and engage with work in significant ways. For example, someone who highly values advancement is driven by achievement, upward mobility,
Climbing the ladder.
development opportunities, yeah. Someone who values autonomy strongly needs the freedom to organize their life and work on their own terms.
Control over their time.
Economic compensation is tied to material outcomes and financial security, and as we saw, has roots in historical work ethics like the Protestant view.
Right, the link to capitalism.
Social values are all about connection, belonging, feeling useful, contributing to collective well-being, encompassing principles like Ubuntu.
Community at work.
Work-family enrichment highlights the positive ways work and family roles can mutually benefit each other, a value increasingly prioritized, especially by younger generations seeking greater flexibility.
Definitely see that now.
And workplace spirituality isn't about organized religion necessarily, but about finding deeper meaning and purpose within work itself,
Meaning in the work.
connecting to a larger sense of self and contributing to life-affirming values like integrity, respect, and social responsibility in the workplace.
It's crystal clear from everything we've discussed how work is anything but a single, simple concept. Its meaning is deeply personal, constantly reshaped by huge external forces like technology and societal shifts.
Yeah.
And critically, by our own internal compass, our values.
What's truly fascinating is seeing how these values interact with the historical shifts we traced, pushing the meaning of work toward something much more fluid, skills-based, and ultimately centered on the individual's search for meaning, growth, and connection
Within this constantly changing world.
within the ever-evolving world of work.
Yeah. So let's bring it back to you, the listener. We've taken this deep dive into the meaning of work, tracing its evolution from ancient views through the industrial digital and into what the sources call the post-digital age of imagination. We've explored the idea of work as a central life interest and dissected the core work and career values that fundamentally shape our perceptions and experiences.
We've seen how the meaning of work isn't some static definition you can just look up in a dictionary, right? It's a dynamic construct shaped by global forces like technology and environment, societal influences,
And importantly.
and most importantly, by your individual values and perspectives.
So what does all this mean for your current experience of work or the work you might pursue in the future?
Well, our source material talks about reflection as a crucial tool for understanding anything complex, and especially something as personal as the meaning of work.
Reflection, taking time to think it through.
Yeah. They suggest that actively reflecting on what you learn helps you connect theoretical concepts to your personal experiences and goals, identify key insights that resonate with you,
What clicks for you?
recognize areas where you might want to grow, and make more informed decisions about your future journey.
So perhaps the most powerful takeaway from this entire deep dive, and something the sources implicitly encourage, is this. As you continue to think about the meaning of work in your own life, maybe consider using reflection. Use it to understand how the concepts we've discussed, the historical shifts, the values that drive us, the trends shaping the future, relate to your unique values, your personal goals, and your lived experiences.
helping you make sense of your own incredible journey in this constantly transforming world of work.